This painting I can look at for hours, and still I'd want to see more of it. In a certain sense, this painting is like a window, a glass through which you can see into another. And a window is a window from both sides. I saw this painting for the first time in Vilnius, Lithuania, when a friend brought me to a small church to pray. He said the church had a very special painting in it, and he thought I might like to see it. The church was in the middle of a short block in Old Town Vilnius, where cobblestone streets are lined with what seem like ancient limestone and brick buildings that have obviously seen a bit of history over the years. We walked into the church, and there, hanging above the main altar, was the painting of Divine Mercy. Then he told me, that is the original. And I realized right there and then that I had never even asked the question, which one of the thousands of Divine Mercy pictures that I had seen was actually the original? Or if there even was an original. But wait, there had to be an original painting if the story of St. Faustina really happened. Oh yeah, the story. The original image of Divine Mercy has quite a story. Let me give you a little background. And background, by the way, I have learned is very important. Not just what's in it, but also what's not. In the 1930s, a young Polish nun named Sister Maria Faustina Kowalska was having extraordinary conversations with Jesus in visions. And she kept a detailed diary about everything that happened. His message, in a word, that his mercy for souls is beyond anything we could ever imagine.
Make it rain somehow on the field of evermore mercy. Come and hold me now, you get behind the plow. Mercy, come and hold me now, you get behind the plow. Mercy, mercy, hold on. We get behind, we get behind, we get behind the fields of evermore.
In one of her visions, Saint Faustina was instructed by Jesus to paint what she saw.
Paint an image according to the pattern you see with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. I promise that the soul that will venerate this image will not perish. I also promise victory over enemies already here on earth, especially at the hour of death. I myself will defend it as my own glory.
I'm gonna make it rain somehow on the fields of evermore. Mercy, come and hold me now, we get behind the plow. Mercy, come and hold me now, you get behind the plow.
So to satisfy some curiosity about the painting, I set out, along with a few friends, some holding cameras and microphones, on a journey with only questions as our sails. That journey, those questions, and this painting, the original image of Divine Mercy, is the subject of this documentary.
Mercy, come and hold me now, you get behind the plow. Mercy, mercy, hold on.
Sister Maria Faustina Kowalska had her first apparition of the merciful Jesus in Pluk, a small town in Poland, on February 22nd of 1931. Sister was transferred by the superiors of her religious community, the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy, to the historic city of Vilnius, where the subsequent apparitions of Jesus as Divine Mercy took place. She lived there in a small convent house until 1936.
message of divine mercy is very important for the whole world, and for all country, I think is most important, because in Vilnius beginning the message of divine mercy, and here in this place Saint Faustina had much meetings with Jesus. Here in this place was dictated.
Right here?
Yes, right here, because she lived here in this corner. Here was her bed, her table, other things. And in 1935, 13 to 14 of September, Jesus here dictated for Saint Faustina the Chaplet of Divine Mercy.
So this is where everything took place. It was also in Vilnius that Sister Faustina met Father Michael Sopochko, her spiritual director, a holy priest who would accompany her on the mission she was given to spread the devotion of divine mercy to the whole world. It was Father Michael Sopochko who would first insist that Sister Faustina begin keeping a diary.
Saint Faustina's išpažintis, confessions was very long. He everything told for Father Sopochka what Jesus said for her, what she answered, what about they talk.
Yes.
And Father Sopochka asked Saint Faustina everything right. And at this time we have diary, because it was time when Saint Faustina diary put in this reading.
Who did?
Yeah, she put,
burned the book?
Yes.
Why?
She listen voice who said, you must burn.
Wait a minute. What voice?
Voice from Pictasis.
From devil?
Devil.
The devil told her to burn the book.
Yes.
So she did it.
Yes, she did. She put maybe, I think, in this here, because this was very close. She write here, and she listened and put. And when Father Sopochka know about this, he said for her that she must write everything what was burned and write more.
When she rewrites her diary, some of which now had to be from memory, she starts out by writing about the image. In fact, the very first words written by St. Faustina in her famous diary are about the painting that she was asked to paint.
O eternal love, you command your sacred image to be painted and reveal to us the inconceivable fount of mercy. You bless whoever approaches your rays, and a soul all black will turn into snow. O sweet Jesus, it is here you establish the throne of your mercy to bring joy and hope to sinful man. From your open heart as from a pure fount, flow comfort to a repentant heart and soul.
Walking between ashes that rise in the form of museums, bars and red lights that light up the street and bounce off the cars.
And Jesus said that she must paint image that she saw, like she saw Jesus. And she tried, but she can't. She gets some pencils, some paper, but she can't, because she was she finished only 3 classes of school, and she can't do this thing. And she asked, said for Jesus, you can help me, because I can't do this, and nobody helped for me.
It was on January 2nd of 1934. that Sister Faustina and Father Sopoćko first visited the artist Eugenius Kazimirovsky to begin work on the most important image that the world would ever know, the original image of Divine Mercy.
Ir tada taip susiklostė, kad ten Sopoćko gavo antrą aukštą patalpas, o pirmam aukšte buvo dailininko Eugenijus Kazimirovski ateljė. Apmokėjo tą darbą Sopoćka, o Kazimirovskis gavo tą ateljė todėl, kad vykdė Vilniuje gyvendamas bažnyčios įvairius užsakymus.
But I think Kazimirovsky painted about 6 months this image.
Wow.
And every week, Saint Faustina from his house, from Antakalnis, twice a week goes to Rasų Street to Kazimirovskis atelier.
Ar žinot, kad seselė Faustina stovėjo prie jo ir jis sakė, ne taip tapai, ne tą tapai ir blogai darai.
Do you know that Sister Faustina used to stand next to him and would tell, you're not doing right, you have to change this and this and that.
I mean, it's amazing that this woman sat behind an artist and said, no, that's not what it is, which is very interesting because I write with my wife. And so I know that that poor painter was dealing with, I mean, this is, she's like, no, this is, she's not consumed with, well, I don't want the painter to be upset. She was on a mission from God. And can you imagine, I didn't like doing homework with my parents watching me. And so this painter, Eugene, I call him Eugene. I call him Gene. He had, Faustina over his shoulder.
To skojarzenie ksiądz Sopoćko pozował przy malowaniu wizerunku Jezusa Miłosiernego. Oczywiście ubrał się w białą szatę, albę, jaką zakładają kapłani przy celebrowaniu liturgii, mszy świętej.
He modeled, oh my gosh, I mean it's only appropriate that he would model, right? He was her advocate on this. And for him to then do the pose is pretty amazing. And so he, there are these 3 characters in surrounding this painting, because he also picked the artist too, right? So he picked the artist who lived upstairs. It's like a Three's Company episode. We all play these different parts at different times, right? We serve as an example of Jesus. We articulate our ideas, our experiences, our personal relationship, and then we're the befuddled artist that's trying to execute or understand someone else's vision. It's a pretty enormous task, but that's a pretty interesting room, right?
Jis pagaliau baigtas, ją atveda, nusiaučia skarą nuo paveikslo ir jinai pravirksta. Išganytojas jos vizijose buvo daug gražesnis negu kad tame paveiksle.
I find that very moving, that she looked at this painting and she wept. I mean, she knew it was inadequate. The Lord himself gave the command, to create a painting. So she had that compulsion, but she knew that this was not adequate to it. Well, good. And there she's like Thomas Aquinas, who at the end of his life looks back at the single greatest theological corpus in our tradition. He looks back at his magnificent work and says, everything I've written seems like straw compared to what's been revealed to me.
I can't tell you anything about Thomas Aquinas. I do know that a lot of high schools are named after that guy. That's where, what an impossible task for that painter. Impossible. But when I look at this painting, here's how I'd want to change it. No, I'm not going to change it. Obviously, she saw God, so the painting's not going to live up to it.
When the picture was painted, this is what we see in Vilnius. When Sister Faustina looked at it, she started to cry. Painter started to calm her, that the best what we can do is this, there you go. It's impossible. Our pains and our techniques doesn't allow more. She agreed with that image, but she agreed with that limitation of that picture, saying, oh, well, it's better than nothing. And we look at it, oh, it's beautiful, but it's so beyond that beauty what Sister Faustina talks about. So that picture is not the purpose of our devotion. And when we look at Jesus, we don't need to say, well, Jesus looks like this picture, that's it. Do you have questions about that? No, it's only entrance.
Not in the beauty of the color, nor of the brush, lies the greatness of this image, but in my grace.
In my world, the world of music, especially as it relates to the divine, sort of defines the undefinable and explains the unexplainable. It gives credence to the incredible. And this is an attempt to sing about something that can't be described, how great thou art. We can talk about the stars and the rolling thunder and all of the things that the song talks about. That's a perfect example of a song that even the melody, it's very simple, and it's a feeling that you get when you hear it. And if it's performed by someone who is in tune with what the composer wants to say, it can be even that much more special.
Access to God, who's beauty itself. God's not one more true thing among many. He's not one more good thing among many, not one more beautiful thing among many. He's the truth itself. He's goodness itself, beauty itself. And see, beautiful art, therefore, speaks of God. Any great work of art becomes a window, a vehicle to God's beauty. God took to himself a human nature to use for his iconic purposes, that we might see the invisible God. So here's the Word, but becoming flesh in this iconic form. And therefore, the icon speaks the Word.
In Christianity, we have images because God was incarnated. Majority of devotional paintings, the paintings that are important in religion, for example, in Christianity, first of all in Christianity, are not artistic. It's not about them being paintings, it's about them being a medium of grace.
Though St. Faustina said, no, the image, it's not as beautiful as the Jesus I saw. But I don't think it's possible to capture in paint and canvas the supernatural beauty of God.
I don't think that thing would be possible with Caravaggio. He listened to nobody.
He wouldn't do this.
He wouldn't do that. He would follow his own insight and something of that. Bernini, but he was a sculptor. Bernini would be a bit different.
Well, Raphael is a very different sentiment. Michelangelo is a very different sentiment. So they all think differently. So if their thought structures are different, their language is different.
Because we know, like, the Sistine Chapel is filled with images of faces, right? And you might know this. You know, like when Da Vinci or whoever was painting, right? Michelangelo. When
the picture shows humility of Jesus, because the picture is not Rembrandt picture, and everybody see that the art is simple. Why it's so simple? Why it's not so powerful? He went to the bottom of our lives the bottom of our simplicity, raising up to the divine heights. And for me, it's an unbelievable message of God that He goes not to the powerful, not to the most, He goes not to most talented, but He goes to most simple. And being with them, the last will be first. The image, which is so simple, is the first for Divine Mercy Year, not Rembrandt. Well, how it comes? It's not our project, it's God's project. If it would be our project, Rembrandt would be first.
No, we all have visions, we wish that we could swim in. All I know's I've fallen what used to be a garden. If they're only visions, I wanna see the real thing, see you as you are.
With the painting now completed, the only question remaining was, where would this giant work on canvas go? You don't just hang a new picture of Jesus in a church somewhere. And, let's just say, the painting depicts Christ in a non-traditional way. In hindsight, of course, we see that God was making all things new. Mercy is not a new teaching in Christianity, but mercy certainly was being revealed in a whole new way through this painting.
Jesus said, "I desire that this image be venerated first in your chapel and throughout the world."
Ir tas pats pirmas jo viešas parodymas buvo baigiantis jubiliejiniams metams, tai yra 1935 metams, tai laikoma nuo Jėzaus mirties 1900 metinėms. Per Atvelykį buvo įstatyta Aušros vartuose, šalia Aušros vartų paveikslą Dievo motinos, ir tada pamatė plati publika, bet jie nežinojo, ką jie dar matė. Jie matė tokį Jėzaus širdies atvaizdą. Jo kilmė šito atvaizdo labai ilgai buvo nutylima.
It was displayed for the first time, Gates of Dawn in Vilnius shrine, which is very famous in Lithuania, and actually the name of the shrine is Mater Misericordia, which is Mother of Divine Mercy. When picture solemnly was exposed, Sister Faustina was participating in that Mass, and suddenly she saw a vision that hand of the Jesus moves and actually blesses city of Vilnius, actually those who are gathered, and that the rays goes through, from that picture, through the crowds, toward whole city and also toward whole the world.
You know we all have visions, we wish that we could swim in. All I know's I've fallen what used to be a garden. If they're only visions, I wanna see the real thing, see you as you are.
Ir jis kurį laiką, žinom, jog jis tiesiog byloja šaltinį, jis iš pradžių laikė savo namuose tą paveikslą, kadangi sesuo Faustina nesiliovė to, ką sakysi, tai galiausiai jis pakabino jį kažkur čia Bernardinių vienuolyno koridoriuose.
In March of 1936, Sister Faustina was transferred to several different convents, beginning with a short stay in Warsaw. In May, after 2 months of being transferred around, she returns to the convent in Krakow, where she is diagnosed with serious pulmonary tuberculosis. She is very ill. Sister Faustina continues to write letters to Father Sopoćko from Krakow, encouraging him to take the painting of Merciful Jesus and make it available for veneration by the faithful. The hallway at the Bernardine convent just wasn't good enough. This was a constant concern of hers throughout her illness.
Kunigas Sopočka, girdėdamas priekaištus Faustinos, kad paveikslas kažkur tai toli nukištas ir kad jau yra priekaištų, taip sakant, iš ganytojo lūpų ištartų, kad jis kažkur tai ten koridoriuose tamsoje, jis pritaiko šitą paveikslą kaip dekoraciją Dieno kūno šventės procesijai.
When began Second War, World War, he asked Vilnius photographer Mikhail Nowitzki made about 150,000 small images.
Paveiksliukai, o tos mažytės seklytės pasklinda, jau ima sklis po pasaulį. Nes prasidėjo karas, tremtis, areštai, kariuomenė, traukimasis iš tėvynės, migracija, visa kita. Ir kiek galim įsivaizduoti žmogų, kuris pasiima su savim šitą paveiksliuką kaip paskutinę viltį absoliučiai lentingomis aplinkybėmis.
So people decided to keep it. Other people concealed it because they were soldiers and they couldn't keep it on their uniform, so they kept it someplace where they could have it close to them.
Faustyna już nie była obecna w Wilnie, wyjechała do Krakowa, do Łagiewnik, klasztoru, który tam siostry Matki Bożej Miłosierdzia od lat miały, i między księdzem Sopoćką a siostrą Faustyną utrzymywany był kontakt korespondencyjnie. Jednakże te kolejne przynaglenia i coraz pełniejsze przekonywanie się księdza Michała Sopoćki, jak ważną jest prawda o Bożym Miłosierdziu, jak potrzeba to miłosierdzie głosić, sprawiły też, że prosił arcybiskupa Jałbrzykowskiego, arcybiskupa wileńskiego o pozwolenie umieszczenia tegoż obrazu w kościele, tak aby wierni mogli przy tym obrazie modlić się i tam by oddawana była cześć Bożemu Miłosierdziu. Ksiądz arcybiskup zezwolił i w 1937 roku tenże obraz został już poświęcony przez księdza Michała i umieszczony w kościele, przy ołtarzu, w kościele świętego Michała w Wilnie.
Tai šitoje bažnyčioje buvo labai jisai ilgai. Tai dar tiesa, tos istorijos jau tas dramatiškumas gal pabaigiant tai, kad seselė Faustina jo čia, kaip jinai norėjo viešai pamatyti, pagaliau viešai pakabinto, taip ir nepamatė.
Ir labai netrukus jinai atsidūrė džiovininkų sanatorijoje, jis serga džiova. Ji miršta, kaip ir dera mistikams, 303 metų amžiaus. 303 metų amžiaus. Vilniui palieka vienas Mykolas Sopočka.
For the sake of a sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of a sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of a sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world.
Nie mogę tu powtórzyć, a raczej ujmować szczegółów naszej rozmowy o tym, a tylko ogólnie zaznaczę, że z początku nie wiedziałem dobrze, o co chodziło. Słuchałem, nie dowierzałem, zastanawiałem się. I dopiero po kilku latach zrozumiałem doniosłość tego dzieła, wielkość tej idei, przekonałem się o absolutności tego starego, wprawdzie zaniedbanego, a domagającego się w naszych czasach odnowienia wielkiego, szczególnego, specjalnego kultu.
For the sake of a sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole. For the sake of a sorrowful passion,
In August of 1948, the Soviet government closed St. Michael's Church, where Father Sopochko was rector and where the original image of Divine Mercy was hung. Artwork from these closed churches was either transferred to other churches or into museums. But this had to happen quickly. Anything that was left behind falls into the hands of whoever was assigned to guard the church. Sacred art was sold in private exchanges, and often these churches were looted.
Ir toje bažnyčioje Švento Mykolo lieka Dievo gailestingumo paveikslas. Matyt, kaip nesenoviškas, naujas, kažkoks tai neturintis meninės ir kitokios vertės, jisai palieka. Bažnyčia jau tuščia. Ir yra liudijimas, kad 1950 metais vasarą dvi moteris, lietuvė ir lenkė, lenkės pavardė Rodzevič, lietuvės pavardė Miniotaitė, eina pro šalį tos bažnyčios Švento Mykolo ir mato pravirus vartus. Jos įeina ir mato paveikslą.
Dvi pamaldžios moteriškės, kaip sakoma, už butelį degtinės, tą paveikslą, čia tokia pasakojimas, išgelbėjo, išpirko iš tuometinio sargo.
Paveikslas buvo palėpė tarp sijų kažkur. Kada jis buvo susuktas, tarp sijų užkištas, nežinau, užpiltas, uždangstytas, va taip jisai. Jis palėpiai praleido praktiškai kaip ir atviram ore, tik tai tiek, kad nelijo ant jo, ir visą, taip sakant. Bum, 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 here.
A lady who took this image from the church of St. Michael after the church was closed in 1948, 9 something or so. Later on she was arrested and was sent to Siberia for several years.
Any public and continued public display of faith was always seen as an action against the state, and so it was persecuted. This was more, in the period of occupation.
In 1941, Vilnius was invaded by the German army and again occupied. From the very beginning, they set out to exterminate Polish and Lithuanian Jews and persecute the Catholic Church. In 1942, the German occupation became merciless against the Catholic Church and the clergy. In March of that year, they arrested all the professors and seminarians at the Vilnius Seminary. Father Sopochko was not at the seminary that day, but a neighbor of his witnessed the Gestapo arriving to his home. They ran to the Bernardine convent to warn him. Disguised as a nun, Father Sopochko was taken out of the city by horse and carriage to an old cottage deep in the village of Yod-Sholei, where he remained and worked as a lumberjack until 1944, when the German occupiers left Vilnius. With the Russian army now occupying Vilnius, Father Sopochko secretly assembles the 9 brave candidates for the new congregation of Faustinian sisters for an underground ceremony where they will take their vows. After being threatened with arrest by the Soviet authorities, Father Michael Sopochko leaves the city limits of Vilnius for a while, but he remains inside Lithuania. Secretly, he is spreading the message of Divine Mercy throughout the Lithuanian outlands.
Yra žinoma, kad kunigas Sopochko buvo priverstas trauktis iš Vilniaus NKVD persekiojimo akivaizdoj. Jisai sutarė gerai su vyskupu Teofiliu Matulioniu, čia svarbi pavardė, Teofilius Matulionis. Ir jam nereikėjo likti Vilniuje, jisai pervažiavo į vyskupiją Kaišiadorių ir ten parapijose skaitydavo savo šitas homilijas, teikdavo apie Dievo gailestingumą.
Net kai kunigas Sopočka išleido pirmasias knygeles, jis rašė apie Dievo gailestingumą, citavo šventą raštą, bandė teologiškai pagrįsti Dievo gailestingumo kultą, bet apie paveikslą buvo neužsiminima, jo kilmę, apie apreiškimus seseriai Faustinai nieko.
Eventually, Father Michael Sopoćko returned to Vilnius, but when the Soviet authorities began to systematically close more churches, the priests and seminarians, even the Archbishop of Vilnius, had to leave for Białystok, Poland to avoid arrest. Father Sopoćko, however, stayed inside Vilnius for 2 more years, secretly teaching the catechism underground.
Palinko liepa šalia kelio, pravirko motina sena, sūneli, tėvynė tave šaukia ir vėl laisva bus Lietuva. Sūneli, tėvynė tave šaukia ir vėl laisva bus Lietuva.
In September of 1947, the Soviets were moving in to arrest Father Sopoćko, but he slips away aboard the last train to Białystok.
Bet taip išėjo, kad jis turėjo išvažiuoti paskutiniu traukiniu iš Vilniaus. Ir kad gailestingo Jėzaus paveikslas liko Vilniuje ir jo negalima buvo, neišėjo jo pernešti, į Lenkiją išvežti. Taip pats kunigas Mykolas Sopoćka yra sakęs, kad tai yra Dievo valia.
Nu kągi, vienu žodžiu, sovietmetis yra tokia baisi epocha, kuomet bet koks pamaldumo judesys yra gniaužiamas.
Ir bažnyčia buvo laikoma priešų, kadangi bažnyčios doktrina niekaip nesiderino su komunistinė ideologija. Ką darė sovietinė valdžia? Pirmiausiai daug bažnyčių uždarė visus vienuolynus.
Sovietmečio cirkuliuoti kažkokiems atvaizdams, spausdiniams tikrai yra labai sudėtingas dalykas. Bet prisiminiau, kad, pavyzdžiui, ir tai reiškia tiek, bažnyčia yra pogrindyje, ar ne? Ir, pavyzdžiui, ruošimasis pirmai komunijai irgi yra pogrindyje. Ir aš atsimenu, kad atėjus į namus, mane su pusseserė seselė, aišku, nedemonstruojant tiek į seselį, išmokė Dievo gailestingumo vainikėlį. Ir atsimenu, kad man taip keista, tokia gyvenime negirdėta, tokia, vis tiek kaip vaikui dėl skaudžios Jėzaus kančios būk gailestingas mums ir visam pasauliui, bet aš tik tai galvoju, kaip gerai trumpesnė negu Sveika Marija, negu rožinis. Bet jos mums atvaizdo nerodė, tiesiog davė rožinį ir kalbėjom tą maldą.
When we look at the history, for example, of Lithuania, so that was the year of trial, of devastation. But the faith of the people start to be alive, start to grow in such a way that they created silent resistance. And the Hill of Crosses of Šiauliai is perfect image of that silent war with communism, without power, without guns, but being so powerful in that message that we have Hill of Crosses and we don't have communists with their guns, where they went.
Meanwhile, Theophilus Metulionis, then Bishop of Kaišiadorys, encouraged local artists to paint copies of Kazimirovsky's painting of Divine Mercy. These paintings by Lithuanian artists still adorn the churches throughout Lithuanian villages.
Ir publikuojama vainikėlis, novena ir maldelės gailestingajam Jėzui. Bet visos ikonografija, visi atvaizdai buvo prastos kokybės. Ir todėl dailininkai, kai jie kopijuodavo, jie neturėdavo gerų atvaizdų. Ir tarkim, mes turim 40 metais dailininko Miškinio nutapytą nežinomai bažnyčiai paveikslą, bet jis nėra visai tiksli kopija. Jeigu mes gerai įsižiūrėtume į Jėzaus veidą, akių kontaktas yra tiesus, toks visai kitoks negu paveiksle. Paveiksle akių žvilgsnis yra nudeltas. Kad iš bažnyčių, kaip minėjau, paveikslai po karo buvo išimami. Tarkim, turim tokį atvejį Bukonių bažnytėlį, mažutę mūrinę bažnytėlį ir turim 55 metais didžiajam altoriui kopiją.
Po Stalino mirties prasideda grįžimai iš lagerių ir iš Sibiro tremčių, deportacijų. grįžta Rodzewicz.
Radzievich, the Polish woman who, with her Lithuanian friend Miniotaite, who together bought the original image of Divine Mercy from the guard at the closed St. Michael's Church, they meet again in Vilnius after all those years. The original image of Divine Mercy is still hidden up in the attic at the home of Radzievich, but it was never hidden from their hearts.
Draugės sustinka ir nutarė, kad kažką reikia daryti, kadangi jisai buvo apgailėtinos būklės, jisai buvo visas šaltas žiemas, susuktas, išpjautas ir panašiai.
There is every indication that there was a restoration of the original image of Divine Mercy done around this point. Pranas Morkas, who has done so much research on the image, looked into who might have done the work. He suspected early on that Elena Šmigelskaitė, a talented art restorer, may have done it.
Aš sužinau, kad Elena Šmigelskaitė turėjo seserį Rožę. Ir mes nuėjom pas ją. Nu ir ką? Sesuo patvirtina, kad taip. Ir ištraukė, atnešė iš kito kambario paveikslą, kopiją, kurią Elena atrestauravusi šitą paveikslą, pasidarė kopiją savo. Dabar ta kopija yra Faustiniečių vienuolyne Vilniuje. Jos nuneša, nežinau, ar dvi moteris, ar viena iš jų, nuneša tą paveikslą į Lenkų katalikų bendruomeniai priklausančią Šventosios Dvasios bažnyčią.
Shortly after the two women gave the mystical painting to the Church of the Holy Spirit, it ended up in the private residence of the parish priest, Father Jon Ellert. Father Ellert was somewhat dismissive of the painting, or perhaps he just didn't want anyone to know that it was in his possession. He kept it inside the walls of the Dominican monastery, away from the public eye. The painting was safe, yes, but still not being exhibited for the veneration of the faithful as Jesus insisted in his apparitions to Saint Faustina.
Ir dar tada vienas svarbus, one more important message. Vatikano sprendimas, tas 58 metų, skeptiškai žiūrinti į sesers Faustinos regėjimus ir su to susijusius dalykus, dalinai buvo iššauktas, aš atsimenat, minėjau kunigą Andrašą, kuris vienintelis iki Sopočkos kažkaip rimtai pažiūrėjo į jos pasakojimus, bet jisai tas srovės patraktavo kaip baltą ir raudoną. Taigi Lenkijos nacionalinės spalvas. Tuo metu pavergtai Lenkijai tai było svarbu.
Bo niektórzy nam zarzucają, że to jest obraz narodowy nasz, bo to jest kolor flagi i dlatego my podkreślamy, że to nie chodzi o biało-czerwoną flagę, ale o krew i wodę. I to jest po prostu krew i woda. Poza tym nigdy woda nie jest biała, taka w sensie koloru białego. Ksiądz Sopoćko przyjechał po II wojnie światowej do Białegostoku w 1947 roku. I tutaj nie miał dostępu już do oryginału obrazu malowanego przez pana Kazimierowskiego.
Ksiądz Sopoćko, gdy znalazł się w Białymstoku, zabiegał już w latach powojennych, aby namalowano nowe wyobrażenie Jezusa. Skoro tamten pozostał, interesował się, co się dzieje z tym obrazem, ale ta żelazna kurtyna, granica, Związek Sowiecki, który objął tereny dzisiejszego Wilna, Wileńszczyzny, nie można było tego obrazu przewieźć do Polski. I wobec tego potrzeba było malować obrazy i ksiądz Sopoćko właściwie był inicjatorem namalowania kilku obrazów. Poprosił artystę, profesora Ludomira Ślędzińskiego, który w Krakowie w 1955 roku namalował obraz Jezusa Miłosiernego, ale też nawiązujący do sceny zjawienia się Chrystusa zmartwychwstałego apostołom w Wieczerniku, gdy pojawia się przed apostołami, mówi: pokój wam, pokazuje im ręce i bok i mówi: komu odpuścicie grzechy, będą odpuszczone. Ksiądz Sopoćko zaznacza też, opisując obraz, co on ma przedstawiać, jak wyrażać tajemnicę miłosierdzia, nawiązuje też do krzyża Chrystusa. I wprost pisze, że jest to jakby spojrzenie Chrystusa z krzyża.
To jest oryginał dziennika
księdza Michała Sopoćki, dziennik po wieloletniej przerwie. Między innymi już po latach, gdy w takich swoich zapiskach dotyczących właśnie obrazu Bożego Miłosierdzia pisze w taki sposób. W kulcie Miłosierdzia Bożego obraz Króla Miłosierdzia odgrywa pierwszorzędną rolę. I dlatego siostra Faustyna, służebnica Boża wtedy, przywiązywała do jego poprawności wielką uwagę. Kilkakrotnie go poprawiała, a wreszcie artysta Eugeniusz Kazimierowski prosił mnie, bym pozował przepasany w albie pasem. W obrazie tym odróżniała ona cechy istotne i polecała czuwać, by one były zachowane. I stąd też i postać, oblicze Chrystus na obrazie, ale także i gesty, ustawienie całej postawy ciała, gesty rąk, także spojrzenie Chrystusa. One miały to wszystko wyrazić i to było trudne. Na pewno malarzowi z jednej strony chodziło o to, by oddać wiernie to, co mówiła siostra Faustyna. Siostra Faustyna miała w swojej pamięci wyobrażenie, wizję Jezusa i próbowała jakby najwierniej przekazywać to, co widziała. Oczywiście Jezus zjawiający się, tak jak to przedstawiała, był tym, który okazywał zmiłowanie, właśnie to miłosierdzie, okazywał swoim wzrokiem, swoim spojrzeniem, swoją całą postawą. Takim był Jezus ukazujący się świętej Faustynie.
Jesus said for Saint Faustina that from this image he looked for us from the cross.
O žinome tą visą istoriją, kad Lagėbnikuose, kur nutapytas Adolfo Hylos paveikslas ir ne vienas. Adolfą Hylą sukūrė bene 200 tų paveikslų ir išsivežė jų reprodukcijas Lenkų kariai emigravę į Ameriką ir jau ten Amerikoje greit pasklido. Ir tai buvo tas Lagėbnikų paveikslas, kadangi per emigraciją tai buvo ir Lenkų emigracija paplito labai greitai. Labai greitai, nes jau 50-metį Amerikoje jau jis paplitęs, bet ne Vilniaus paveikslas. Nes Vilniaus paveikslas buvo čia, kadangi karas per frontą išvežti tuos paveikslėlius, matyt, nelabai. Kažkaip ir po to, o paskiau po karo Lietuva, Lenkija atsiskyrė ir tos komunikacijos tokios laisvos irgi nebuvo. Ten było savas atvaizdas, čia buvo mūsų atvaizdas.
Ksiądz Sopoćko zawsze mówił, że w ogóle podkreślał, że trzeba wrócić do obrazu Kazimierowskiego.
In Krakow is other image by painter Hyla, Adolf Hyla, painted 10 years later. Okay. 5 years later after Saint Faustina's death.
Prosił Hyłę, aby malowany był obraz według wizji siostry Faustyny. Tutaj był każdy szczegół ważny, wysokość podniesionej ręki.
Maybe you know, maybe not know, but it is worth to know that Father Sopoćko, when he directed the painter, corrected all errors in the presentation of Christ Merciful in the pictures made after Kazimierowski made his picture. Because there was the time when Poland and Lithuania were divided, there was no way to go and to see, to pray here. So in Poland they painted Christ Merciful on the tree, on the landscape of mountains, so many things, and it annoyed Father Sopoćko.
To jest czas przed drugim Soborem Watykańskim i wtedy ten kanon gestów liturgicznych był bardzo ściśle określony. Kapłan nigdy nie podniósł ręki powyżej ramienia przy błogosławieństwie w ten sposób. Jednak musiała być zachowana linia.
There were pictures known by the painter named Hyła. First, as I know, Sopoćko informed him that his paintings were not correct, not conformed with what Sister Faustina knows. He knows what she knows, because she divided all knowledge with him. But Hua didn't know, did not accept his, the picture. The painters did not like to be a little bit corrected. So he did not agree to change his way of painting. He painted about 200 pictures. Yes.
To znaczy, na pewno sam w sobie obraz pana Hyły ma wartość kultu. Przed tym obrazem się wiele lat ludzie modlą i na pewno uzyskują łaski. Bo to nie obraz, ale Pan Jezus przez ten obraz udziela łask. Natomiast naszą ideą jest wrócić do pierwowzoru i podkreślać ten obraz, który był malowany przy siostrze Faustynie. Przy księdzu Sopoćce.
I am not painter, and for me it's not important different colors or different details. I look for Jesus. Listen, you look, he listens.
I think he's listening.
I think the picture of Kazimierowski is, for us, the first, the original, let's say, original. And when we copy or made artistic copies, we should stick to this.
The various other images are trying to convey the same truth. And the truth and the most important part of the revelation is not the image itself, but it is the message of divine mercy.
Ne, pats paveikslas nėra būtinas tam, kad gailestingumas mus pasiektų. Dievo dvasia ir taip veikia. Bet šis paveikslas mums yra kaip dovana, kaip Jėzaus dovana. Ir tai yra toks dalykas, prie kurio mes labai konkrečiai galime prisiliesti, pamatyti ir gyventi ne vien tik mintimi iš švento rašto apie Dievo gailestingumą, bet labai konkretus įrodymas, liudijimas Kristaus valios, toks prašymas, kad ją išpildytume, tai davimas mums šito paveikslo.
Back in Vilnius, the original image of Divine Mercy is still somewhere in the private residence of Father Elert, pastor of the Church of the Holy Spirit, who really has no use for it. Father Josef Grasiewicz, a personal friend of Father Sopoćko, was being transferred to a little wooden church in a small town inside the Soviet Union called Nova Ruda, and arranged to take the painting with him.
Later on, when I was an assistant priest here in Vilnius, in St. Teresa's Church, one priest from Belarus came to me. I know him very well. I knew him very well. His name was Monsignor Joseph Grasiewicz. And I knew that he was very much involved with the spreading of the Divine Mercy because he knew Father Michael Sopoćko.
Personally?
Personally. He met him, he knew Father Michael Sopoćko personally. He knew him from very ancient times before the Second World War. They were students of the same seminary here in Vilnius, so he knew him very well. And once he came to me and he told me the story that after the Second World War, after the church of St. Michael here in Vilnius was closed, in that time he was in prison.
Was he in like a labor camp prison or Siberia?
Yeah, in Siberia somewhere, I don't know exactly where. So, yeah, he was in prison. And when he was released from this prison, he started to looking about this image. And through some people, he discovered that the image was in the Church of the Holy Spirit, in private apartment of the parish priest of the church. It was and he came to him and he asked him, give me this image. Please take, you can take this image. And he took this image and he went to Belorussia, to a very, very small church where he was a parish priest, Nova Ruda. But in 1970, the church was closed. The church was closed by Soviet authorities in Nova Ruda, and now is some burial, some stories, something used for collective farms and so on. All other things were moved to another churches, liturgical things and so on. But image remained. Why remained? Because he was fixed very, very high.
The image.
Image. And those who were taking all these things, liturgical things, from the church in Nova Ruda, they were not able to reach. So, okay, it can stay. It was staying there for a long time. So because it came to me, I don't remember exactly, but maybe 1983, 4 or so. So about 14, 15 years it was staying there. No one was taking.
For 16 years, this irreplaceable and priceless painting was left abandoned, hanging in the cold Nova Ruda church. But the original image of Divine Mercy would not be lost. While the image was hanging high above the altar, many people, including Father Grasiewicz, would sneak into the church and pray before the image. People kept the devotion to Divine Mercy alive in their hearts, and even Rome would not have completely forgotten. The devotion to Divine Mercy would be in the hands of a new generation with leaders who would not forget the past and her lessons.
Błogosławiony ksiądz Michał Sopoćko odchodził z tego świata. Jesteśmy w pokoju, w którym przeżył już jako starszy, wymagający opieki pan ostatnie lata swego życia. Odchodził z tego świata, umierając, gdy właściwie to nabożeństwo jeszcze poddane było zakazowi Stolicy Apostolskiej z 1959 roku, ale żył nadzieją i wiedział, że cześć dla Bożego Miłosierdzia i kult Bożego Miłosierdzia rozwijać się będzie i zostanie zaaprobowany w Kościele.
Father Michael Sopoćko died on February 15th in 1975.
Carry on, high into the hills.
In 1978, on April 15th, just over 3 years after Father Sopoćko died, the Vatican's Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office withdraws its original proclamation banning the devotion to Divine Mercy.
Cold commands, just a pining boy.
And I knew this Father Joseph very well. He's a very pious priest and very dedicated to the church priest, a priest who suffered for a long and so on. So please help me. And he was very worried about the future of the image. He was worried that somebody could steal the image. Or maybe it is a wooden church, maybe, you know, some fire or something. Sure. So we have to take. And according to the will of Father Michael Sopoćko, who was died in this time, image must be in Vilnius. It was the will of Father Michael Sopoćko.
Savaime aišku, kad jau nėra jokių galimybių tą padaryti oficialių kelių. Kita, taip sakant, teritorija, respublika, kiti santykiai, kitas požiūris ir taip toliau. Ir aš turiu tą dokumentą ir jisai egzistuoja. Aš tik nežinau, kur aš jį padėjau. Dviejų vienuolių pasakojimas, kaip jos grobė šitą paveikslą iš Nova Ruda. Nu, kidnappingas čia ne visai, vis tik tai.
Jis vartoja žodį pagrobė.
Susigrąžinimas vis tik tai. Puikiai scena, čia reiktų suimprovizuoti kaip nors čia.
I asked him, how you're going to do this, to transfer here? Okay, we have plans, so, and he discovered his plan, so we're going to paint another one, very similar to this. And they did.
from the written testimony of one of the nuns who was on the mission.
First, Father Grasevich arranged for a copy of the image to be painted in Hrodno. Then that painting was secretly taken to Nova Ruda.
And the original image was taken from these frames, and the other one was put in the frames that the people did not even recognize that something. Maybe somebody told, that some a little bit better looked.
Once upon a time, in November, tamsią naktį, lietinga, tos vienuolės ir vairuotojas sunkvežimio nuvyko į Novą Rudą. Man sunku įsivaizduoti, kaip jos iš tokios nepatogios pozicijos, taip gulsčioj plokštumo įtvirtintas paveikslas, sunkus, tarp kitko, 2,5 metrai, kaip jos jį nukabino. Gal nenukabino, išpjovė iš rėmo, kiekvieno atveju rėmas jau nefigūruoja tolimesniam pasakojime, vadinasi, galėjo išpjauti, bet vis tiek šiek tiek gal kopėčias turėjo, o čia šita scena man pati mieliausia visoje šito istorijoje yra, kai susiduria konkretus mažas žmogus su tokiu dideliu, sakysim, reiškiniu, bet jos tą padarė.
We climbed up to the choir loft and from there found a way into the attic. The ceiling ties of the church were loose, so we removed some tiles from the ceiling right above the image. Through this hole, we pulled the image, frame and all, up to the attic. There we removed the canvas from the stretcher and rolled up the painting.
Of the promised land. So carry on.
Using some rope, we lowered our replacement copy through the hole in the ceiling and hung it on the same hooks.
Jos praleidžia naktį pas kažkokius pažįstamus ir iš ryto jas nuveža, jos susuka paveikslą į tūtą ir vairuotojas jos nuveža į geležinkelio stotį Gardino. Yra traukinys. Jos vaikšto perone ir pamato aplink jas besisukiojantį milicininką. Taip žiūrinėja jas ir visą laiką aplinkui sukosi. Jos supranta, kad jos to įklius, karščiausiai meldžiasi, jos, tiesą sakant, visą naktį prieš tai meldėsi, kad kaip nors sėkmingai pavyktų. O daiktas, matyt, susuktas taip pat ne į ilgį, o į šitą, bet vis tiek 1,5 metro, 2 moteris kažkokia tūta, suviniota, įtartinas objektas. Jos meldžiasi, galų galę tas policininkas jas palieka, jos sėda į traukinį, atvažiuoja į Vilnių ir Vilniaus gatvėmis vėl su ta tūta eina.
Mr. Borzukevich stayed awake that entire night venerating the image. Early in the morning, he took Sister Teresa and me to the railway station.
After spending many long years in Nova Ruda, in what was now an abandoned church, the original image of Divine Mercy was finally coming home to Vilnius.
So carry on.
Secret mission. It was a very secret mission. Yeah, it was a very secret mission, and they brought this image to Kashkevich, and they remained this image in the church, not handed directly to him, to Kashkevich, but remained near some place.
They left the image?
They left the image, yeah, in the church.
Why didn't they give it to him directly?
Well, he didn't live here in that time, so maybe they're afraid. I don't know. So I wasn't present, so only because only heard the story. So I'm recalling to the stories.
I, Sister Cecilia Obuchowska, Superior General of the Sisters of the Mother of Mercy of the Gates of Dawn in Vilnius, witnessed these events and testified to the accuracy of this history of the image of the divine mercy of Jesus.
In the darkest night, death's dragon stung, but I have seen the stars. Now my wonder's won. So carry on, and on the moon we'll stand through a blazing veil to the promised land.
And it was right time when this image arrived here to Vilnius.
Lithuania, for quite some time, disappeared from the maps. Time of occupation, you just saw USSR. If we got some maps that were printed that still had Lithuania on it, that was a great blessing that people had not forgotten, some governments had not forgotten. But it's interesting that the image parallels that same history. For almost 50 years, it disappears. It's painted, God comes out just before the war. There's prayer, adoration, the image is venerated, and all of a sudden with the occupation, something like the church in Lithuania. The church in Lithuania, the government tries to make disappear. And yet, hidden within the churches that are open, in the underground, in homes, the church continues to live. And the picture too. It disappears from public view. It gets hidden in the back of churches. And with the resurrection of Lithuania in 1989, just a few years before, as the movement for independence grows, the picture returns back to Lithuania.
For love wrote my story as love draws your bow. He's the giver and taker of the breath that we breathe. He's loved you forever, and his love's in me.
So the parish priest took this image. They examined this image here in Vilnius with some specialists. The image needed to be renovated a little bit.
Through the rain and the wind to love's dwelling. Over and over and over, his love is poured out before I begin running.
That face is painted very carefully. If you look as art historian into, there is big difference between how, for example, his alb or his tunic is painted, even hands. It's much quicker touch, because I believe that Faustina, even we don't have very expressive testimony or very documentary testimony about, Faustina was very much involved in how is the face.
The face of Jesus inspires so deep respect. There is, I dare to say, there is nothing that can be considered as overdone. It is really as close as a painter can come. It is he himself.
After this final restoration of the original image of Divine Mercy, it was returned to the Church of the Holy Spirit in Vilnius, a church that had Mass exclusively in the Polish language, as there were, and still are, naturally, many Polish-speaking people in Vilnius. The painting was hung above the side altar as you enter the church.
Father Kaszkiewicz put this image in special altar on the right side of the church when you are entering to the church. Pope John Paul II prayed in front of the image.
I believe it was his first time that he was able to come and pray before the original of Our Lady of the Gates of Dawn, the Mother of Mercy, which is another place that he visited while he was here.
You know, the link from this image and the experiences of Faustina through that young kid, Karol Wojtyła, coming here to pray, going through this maelstrom of Poland suffering in the late 30s and the 40s and 50s, and then coming up into that heroic Pope. There's a beautiful arc to that story.
Siostra Faustyna i Jan Paweł II. Nie można ich rozdzielać. Mówiąc o łagiewnikach w Krakowie, nie zapominamy także o Wilnie i innych miejscach, w których żyła i modliła się. Ale też i napisała dzienniczek, bo tak jej kazał Pan Jezus spowiednik. Siostra Faustyna powiedziała, świat dziś jest niezdolny do nawrócenia się. Zostało miłosierdzie. A ja się teraz pytam, dlaczego teraz jest tak bardzo ożywiony kult Bożego Miłosierdzia? Pierwsze objawienie i kult był przed wojną. Jakoś przestrzec Pan Bóg chciał ludzi przed katastrofą ostatniej wojny światowej. Teraz z powrotem trzeba pogłębić, dlaczego teraz ten kult tak się ożywił na całym świecie. Więc powróćmy do Bożego Miłosierdzia, do Jezusa Miłosiernego. Amen.
It seemed to him that this was not a vision of God's work in the world for Poland alone. This was something of universal application. That's why he opened a beatification cause for her when he was the Archbishop of Krakow. And that's why he made her the first saint of the Great Jubilee of 2000.
Kaip žinoma, išvykdamas iš Lietuvos, ir aš tą raštelį turiu, Sopočka paliko nurodymus, kaip su jo visokiais daiktais elgtis. Jis viską užrašė tai naujai Dievo gailestingumo bažnyčiai, kurią jisai svajojo, kad kada nors bus pastatyta. Ir ten taip pat jis palieka, yra žodis obraz. Vadinasi, obraz gali būti, turbūt kaip paveikslas šiuo atveju. Va. Ir jis liko čia. Sopočka tiesa, kaip ir visi, kurie išvažiuoja iš tėvynės kažkur, mano, kad po metų grįž, negrįžo. Kardinolas Bačkis pasirinko šitą buvusią tokią šventos trejybės bažnytėlę.
Buvo atšventinta gailestingumo šventovė, į kurią turėjo būti gailestingumo sekmadienį iškilmingai perneštas gailestingojo Jėzaus paveikslas. Ir kaip žinome, jis nebuvo perneštas. 2 metus, kai gailestingumo šventovė buvo atidaryta ir tuo metu ten būrėsi ir nauja bendruomenė, centriniam altoriuje nekabojo joks paveikslas. Ir tai buvo ir sąmoningai padaryta, nepakabinta tam paveikslą. Dėl to, kad mes žiūrėtume į tą tuščią vietą ir išmelstume Dievo malonę. Reikia tą vietą ir paruošti Dievui. Tai tą rytą, po rytinių pamaldų, su žmonėmis, kurie buvo paprašyti, atėjome į Šventosios Dvasios bažnyčią, pagarbiai nuėjome paveikslą, pakabinome, jau tam reikalui buvo paruošta ir seniau buvo paruošta kopija. Ta kopiją pakabinome vietoje originalo, originalą pernešėme gailestingojo Jėzaus šventovę.
Kunigas Vaidas su asistentu pasiėmė kažkokias kopėčias, nueina į tą, ten netoli greta Šventosios Dvasios bažnyčią. Ten būdi patruliai, 2 moteris. Mato, įėjo kunigas su kažkuo tai irgi dvasiškais rūbais. Ir netenka žado, pamatė, kad statomos kopėčios, kunigas lipa aukštyn ir nuiminėja paveikslą.
In the hot summer day,
And they were amazed when the priest put the ladder and started to climb and take the painting off. And one of the women ran out of the church and started calling for help. And another one wanted to push the ladder, but somehow Father Vaidas succeeded to remain on the ladder, and he took that painting and the Vaidas and his assistant took the ladder.
Tai yra labai svarbus paveikslas, tai yra Jėzaus prašymu nutapytas paveikslas. Ir pasaulyje tokių dalykų nėra. Ir kai sutvarkėme altorių, pakabinom gailestingo Jėzaus paveikslą, viską pradėjome tą dieną šventosiomis mišiomis, kurias aukojo vyskupas Juozas Tunaitis ir dabartinis Vilniaus arkivyskupas Gintaras Grušas. Iki paveikslo pernešimo gailestingo Jėzaus paveikslas niekada net kabojo niekur centriniam altoriuje. Jis buvo perneštas ne į šiaip savo bažnytėlę. Dievo apvaizda taip vedė ir arkivyskupą, kad galbūt jisai net ir pats nesuprasdamas, Dievo dvasios įkvėptas paveikslą pernešė į tą bažnyčią, kurioje dirba palaimintasis kunigas Mykolas Sopočka, Faustinos nuodėmklausys. Padaryčiau lygiai tą patį ir taip pat su malda, pasitikėjimu Dievu ir manau net nelaukiant 2 metų. Palaimintasis kunigas Mykolas Sopočka būtų lygiai tą patį padaręs su gailestingo Jėzaus paveikslu. Savo dienoraštyje rašo. Štai prieš atvažiuodama į Vilnių aš matau gailestingo Jėzaus paveikslą centrinėme altoriuje, mažoje bažnytėlėje, ir matau, kaip ta bažnytėlė tampa nuostabia šventovė.
But for us, it's the first image, and first is the first. Always remains the first, and will remain the first.
Kazimierowski, można powiedzieć, że Pan Jezus zaaranżował sąsiedztwo księdza Sopoćki i Kazimierowskiego na czas malowania obrazu, bo dosłownie tuż po namalowaniu tego obrazu, obraz został ukończony w lipcu 1934 roku. Zarówno ksiądz Sopoćko, jak i pan Kazimierowski wyprowadzili się z tego mieszkania. To tak jakby na ten czas tylko mieli tam mieszkać i potem ich drogi się rozeszły. Ostatecznie pan Kazimierowski zamieszkał w Białymstoku. Zmarł 23 października 1939 roku w Białymstoku. Wiemy, że podobno na zapalenie płuc. Jaka była prawda powodu jego śmierci? Trudno jest w tej chwili to stwierdzić. Dla Polski był to czas bardzo trudny. 17 września rozpoczęła się dla nas wojna ze strony wschodniej i Białystok był w pierwszej linii tej ofensywy wschodniej i nie wiemy, jaki był powód śmierci pana Kazimierowskiego tak naprawdę.
There are several theories about how Eugeniusz Kazimierowski died. Some say he was paid an unkind visit by the merciless NKVD predecessors of the KGB. He died only a few years after painting his masterpiece of Mercy, 1 year after St. Faustina's death. It is doubtful that he ever saw his painting displayed publicly.
Jį palaidojo vis tik tai kapinėse ir kunigo Mykolo Sopočkos rūpesčių ant jo antkapio buvo šito paveikslo atvaizdas įdėtas. Čia svarbu čia. Ir dabar kunigas Sopočko yra palaidotas ant specialioj toj katedroj savo, o anksčiau, prieš perkeliant, jisai buvo maždaug už 10 metrų nuo Kazimierovskio.
Taip, tarsi pripažįstama, kad tikrai Eugenijui Kazimierovskiui pavyko nutapyti paveikslą, nors vargšas gi tapė, nes sudėtingomis sąlygomis, kaip žinot.
But when I look at this painting, and you hear the history of this artist, it speaks to me that there's a lot of sacrifice. Obviously, we know around saints, but there's a big sacrifice of this artist. So he did this iconic, famous painting, and maybe hanging that, having that expectation, people were like, when's your next Divine Mercy painting? And so that, I would imagine that would torture him, right? He was trapped in maybe an idea of a one-hit wonder.
He needs millions and millions of people to reproduce him.
The body of Christ. Yeah.
The body of Christ, the mystical body of Christ. We can express that mercy of God in our life, and we can recognize the mercy of God in the image of our brothers and sisters. And the more we recognize it, the more we recognize Christ. We need not be saints, and still we are images of God, whether we want it or not, whether we recognize it or not, whether we believe it or not. But we are all images of God.
Even the most perfect portrait, the most perfect painting will always remain below the human divine reality of Jesus.
Because in the original, Christ appears on the back is black. It signifies that you cannot enter deep into the nature of God. In some icons, this black hole, Christ comes from this. It's mean there is some, always, we know about God because he speaks to us, but there is always some space which is not accessed by us.
We all get to faith in a different way. We all essentially jump off the diving board, but somebody might have a different, analogy. But we're all sitting there. There is a leap, and there's also a leap with art in that some of it is the artist is aware of it, but some of it is the artist is not aware of it. So that painter knew something, Faustina knew something, but Faustina and the painter didn't know, which is a separate thing. There's something of the art here that we're not supposed to understand, which also goes along with the idea that we are, that we have to take a leap here. I'll take that leap.
I think it really, really works in that way. And there's so little distraction. I think it's if you think about it, it's iconographically, it's a knockout.
This is Faustina trying to describe the indescribable, the painter trying to do the impossible, Father Michał trying to somehow manifest all of this. That's part of its power, because all of us are imperfect images of the divine creator.
This painting is an attempt to make the unfathomable fathomable. It's an attempt to take something that's completely incapable of being described or explained and given to people to try to understand or to feel. The feeling that you get when you look at it, whether you know the history or not. That's what I think it's attempting to do very successfully. And those instances are very rare, I think. But maybe we can start to scratch the surface of what unfathomable mercy is with art.
When music stops and silence starts, you understand the beauty of that music and the beauty of the silence. But in order to have this understanding of silence, you need to have that piece of music. All images will disappear.
Father Sopoćko was beatified on September 28, 2008 in Białystok, where he lived out the end of his life. His cause for canonization continues, headed by Hendrik Cerescu, Auxiliary Bishop of Bialystok.
There's a reason why this devotion came out now, because we need this message right now.
God knew that we were going to need mercy in this time, right now, in a huge way. And so sort of the time bomb with the Vilnius images, there was a lot of difficulties of getting the image. There was a lot of difficulties, like, you know, it needed to be restored at some point. And, you know, all of those things I think were part of God's plan so that right now people can start to discover the beauty of that original Vilnius image and let the face of Christ in it, let those rays really touch hearts in this time when we need it, you know, I would say probably more than ever before.
Jesus can speak through the image to the heart of the people, and I think he does. At least this is what he promises.
Jesus said, "I am offering people a vessel with which they are to keep coming for graces to the fountain of mercy. That vessel is this image with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you."
When you see these rays going from his heart, you know he's saying, I'm all yours.
You can really enter into the mystery of Christ, his real presence. And real presence is something that is fundamental to art, is the vera presenza. And when we're talking about Christ, we're talking about a very special real presence. And for a Catholic, you have this real presence in the Blessed Sacrament.
The icon of the invisible God, that's what the Eucharist is too, you know. It's everything. It's Christ himself. It's the divine mercy coming forth to us, you know. In its sacraments, in its saints, in the Eucharist, and also in sacred art, the incarnation is prolonged. This is an example of it.
Here, it's very simple. It's one simple thing. It's not overblown. It's about the mercy that comes from the Sacred Heart. It's not a visual of the heart. It's not a visual of the sacrifice. It's about the mercy, the light that is flowing out of him, right? And that ties in with the black background, which is the darkness that we all exist in. That's what this painting's about, is that Jesus is this light coming out of the darkness, because we all exist in darkness, which is also very analogous to the notion of mercy.
Because it speaks to the heart. It's very, very important. Look at this image. Yeah, Jesus is blessing everybody. Good man and sinner, saint, and this who never met God. Saint, everybody. He bless because of his divine mercy is the attitude of God. He bless this man, everybody, all human being, to convert these people, to strengthen their faith, and so on. Later on, the left hand shows to his heart this love of Jesus, love to everybody, to all people, comes from his heart. And the third very important point, Jesus presented not in static position, but in dynamic position. He's going to me, going to you, going to other people, to all people. That's very important.
Despite the presence of God in directing the work, we must be responsible for doing everything we can to promote it. We must continue to do it despite the fact that our efforts seem at times to be fruitless. That is, only what seems to be. Those efforts have been the foundations of the work the Lord wants.
Ksiądz Sopoćko nie doczekał się tego momentu, kiedy obraz faktycznie mógł opuścić teren Litwy w formie już kopii, ale dzisiaj wracamy do pierwowzoru.
I think the original in this whole thing was the apparition and the revelation that took place to Saint Faustina. None of us are going to get to view Jesus in her room as she did.
And this message is very important in this time. The Chaplet of Divine Mercy was very important. The image of Divine Mercy is very important for all us. Not only for me, for you too, for all the world.
Nes, čia paveikslo istorija visa tokia yra. Ten kažkas darosi aplinkui, jis negali palikti abejingų. Čia kelionė nėra pasibaigusi.
In the halo of the living lies the ancients and the dead, the broken. We don't read too good, 'cause we can't spell too good. So I've read, God bless the innocent, just waiting on a home, and the cross is wide and heavy, and the winter's bite is cold. In the doorway where my family lie, where the downcast cry in the sword. They're hungry, I can make it rain, and their tears just change to blood and oil. But God bless the broken heart, they're just waiting on the day when they're free from falling victim, when they can give it all away. The altar of the artist lies the question and the cure. We are the tempted, held to the mystery, bound by the artist's plea for love that's pure. God bless the innocent, and just waiting on the day, and the cross is wide and heavy, and they give it all away. Holy God, Holy Mighty One, Holy Immortal One, have mercy on us and on the whole world. Holy God, Holy Mighty One, Holy Immortal One, have mercy on us and on the whole world. Holy God, Holy Mighty One, Holy Immortal One, have mercy on us and on the whole world. Have mercy on us and on the whole world. Have mercy on us and on the whole world.